Coming up next, we're going to take a virtual garden tour and get a virtual cooking demonstration from Dr. Sally Brown, who is a soil scientist and a professor at the University of Washington, who just also happens to be a former chef. Dr. Brown is going to take us virtually into her garden and show us where she plants and grows zucchini, potatoes, and onions using loop compost. And then she's going to take us into the kitchen and show us how to cook these delicious zucchini potato fritters, which I'm super excited about because I like zucchini and potato and all those things together. So that should be super, super fun. Now, what is loop compost, right? So maybe you've seen the trucks around that are the King County loop. Well, just so happens that loop is a fertilizer replacement, and it's made from biosolids. Yes, let's get scientific, boo. Biosolids. This means that this particular fertilizer replacement is produced by the cleaning, recycling, and transforming 100% of the food and poop that goes into your toilets and drains. That is what I said. Food and poop, my friends, turned into a thing to make a thing that we can use on a thing. Yes, that's right, because, nature makes no waste. So that then is used to grow crops, bigger crops and trees. It's used by commercial farmers. And, it's like, what alternative, right? I mean, food and poop transform. That is so scientific. Now, loop generates a healthier and more productive soil that's better for people, plants, and really the planet in general, right? So it is something that we should be thinking about using moving forward. For those of you who like the green thumb, this could be for you. Loop is environmentally responsible, protects fish and other wildlife, and does not cause nutrients to run off into the waters. It helps the soil hold rainwater and runoff like a sponge, which keeps dirty water from flowing into Puget Sound. That's dope, right? It's not going into the sound or your rivers or your streams. Basically, get to know loop as a compost. But right now, in this moment, let's also get to know Dr. Sally Brown and some more information and that recipe. Sally, let's do it.
Hi, I'm Sally Brown. I'm a soils professor at University of Washington, and we're very fortunate that we have a house outside of Cle Elum. And my husband here talked me into starting a garden, and I've gotten fully addicted. One of the reasons that I've gotten so addicted is because I use the biosolids compost, and it doesn't require a great deal of skill. I'm primarily a cook, not a grower, but I can fake it really well with this stuff. So onions here are one of the greatest things to grow. You get your onion starts, and they come these little teeny weeny things, and you plant them at a good spacing apart, and it's really neat to watch them. Here you can see how they've just taken off. They love the biosolids compost, these guys. And then other thing that responds well and stores well are carrots. Carrots also love the biosolids compost and the wood ash, and these are just starting to get to where you can see a little bit of the orange root that looks like a carrot. They'll get really big. And then here is a kind of zucchini. If you don't eat all your zucchini, which can be a real challenge, these turn into a hard squash. Potatoes are another great thing to grow here. In fact, they thrive. What's different for potatoes, though, is they really need a friable, light soil because you want those potatoes to have the space to grow big. Okay, today you get zucchini potato fritters. These are fabulous, big hit with the family. first thing, always wash your vegetables. Okay, I'm gonna cut the ends off. One of the wonderful things about living in King County, you can put your food scraps in the food yard bin, but we are able to compost at home. So these go right in the compost bin over here. Next thing is to grate the zucchini. Zucchini is pretty easy and straightforward to grate. It works really well to grate it right into the container where you want to keep it. And the main thing here you have to be careful of is to preserve your fingers. It really doesn't take as long as you think it's going to. The other thing that's possible is you can use a Cuisinart to do this. I have the attachment. I suppose with a PhD I could figure out how to do that, but I grate it by hand and try and save the fingers. So you have your grated zucchini. It's a lovely bowl full, and zucchini is all water, and you want to get out some of the water. So what I do is I pour a lot of salt, and don't worry, I'm going to rinse this, and I toss it with the zucchini, and I use my fingers to make sure that the salt exposure is not just limited to the top layer of zucchini, and get it good and mixed. Then get it off my fingers and put it away till later on. You should leave your zucchini, it doesn't need to be very long. 20 minutes is more than enough to get some of the water out of the zucchini, and I'll show you how we do that in a bit. Okay, these are the onion tops that we borrowed from the garden. I'm doing a pretty fine dice here. This will give a nice touch of oniony flavor to these. It's fine to do this with a finely minced onion. If you don't have scallions, you can use a red onion. If you have scallions, white part, green part, all good. Very forgiving. These go in the big bowl that you're going to use to mix everything. I got some oregano from the garden. It's done a fabulous job of taking over the area right behind our deck, and we get a lot of very happy bees, and a lot of what we cook now has oregano in it. When you chop this stuff, it just has a wonderful, wonderful aroma. And then that goes right in your major mix bowl. One way that I changed the original recipe was the oregano. Another way was the feta cheese. Quantities are not so important. I just got a block from the supermarket, and you make sure your feta cheese is crumbled. This is going to be the bowl that gets everything all mixed together and that you then use to fry from. Okay, time to grate the potato. One of the deals with grating potatoes is it's good to use the bigger ones for this. The little ones, you have much more of a finger hazard potential. I make these fritters from our potatoes and our zucchini as a great way to use up stuff from the garden. The original recipe calls for about equal proportions of zucchini and potato. You can vary this depending on what you have a lot of. So after the zucchini's been sitting in the salt, I fill that bowl with water. Helps rinse the excess salt off the zucchini, and the zucchini at this point has lost a lot of its liquid. So I pour the whole batch through a colander, get rid of the water, and then squeeze the zucchini dry and dump it in this big mixing bowl. The way I squeeze the zucchini, I'm also going to squeeze the moisture out of the potatoes. That's, again, you don't want watery mush, you want crispy. Crispy is critical to getting my husband to eat it. It also means that it spatters less when you cook it. There are many reasons to get the extra moisture out. And you can see the water coming out. I'll show you something neat about squeezing potatoes in just a minute. Okay, if you look closely here, it looks just like muddy water or weird water. I'll come back to this because the starch in the potato water will settle out at the bottom, and if you let it just sit for a few minutes here, you can dump the water off the top and then use the starch on the bottom, and it helps these stick together. Okay, I load this up with pepper, It doesn't need any additional salt because you'll still have some residue salt from the zucchini. You can use already ground pepper. I love grinding my own pepper. You can see there's a lot of black right here. Recipe calls for a little bit of flour and a little bit of cornmeal. And why measure? I like the coarser cornmeal to make sure it binds together. Recipe also calls for some eggs. The amount of eggs that you need is really a judgment call. I'm using 2 here. I spend fortune not on clothing but on designer eggs. So you mix it, you dump them on top. You can even see when they're mixed how bright that yellow is from these yolks. And now let's see if we have the magic from the potatoes, and dump the extra water. And you can see when I tilt it, you see that white on the bottom? Mm-hmm. That's the starch. And time to get your hands nice and dirty. You want to make sure that you break up the clumps of zucchini. You want to make sure that you're getting a good mixture, and the cheese and the scallions get mixed in. If you have a kid and you let that kid loose in mixing this stuff up with their hands, you will have one happy kid that will not only like eating these better, but will have a big sense of pride and ownership because they got to mix this. Olive oil is really good. You can put some butter in with the olive oil if you want. Easy way to test and see if your pan is hot enough is get your hand with a little water, and you want a noise. That's a little bit of a noise. You want a little more pronounced noise. So I'm going to stand here and wait for a minute to let it get hotter. Okay, we should be pretty hot now. So I'm going to take a handful and I'm going to just set it down, and it makes a nice noise. I can usually, in this size pan, get 5 or so in. I'm trying not to make them too high because you don't want raw potato. It does not taste very good. When you first start frying these, the pan isn't quite as hot as it gets over time, and so you have to be patient. And sometimes you have to walk into the other room. Sometimes you have to engage the family in unnecessary conversation just to kill time while you're waiting for these to be done, because they're really better if they're crispier and if the potatoes are fully cooked. You can see on the edges they're getting nice and brown. That's usually a good sign that it's time to turn them. You may have to stop a little on the sides to make sure they're not stuck together. Oh, and you can smell them now. And see, here we have one that's well stuck. That one not quite as done as you want. So we'll move the pan so it gets better heat on the other side. And now again, you want to make sure these cook enough, so it's time to start cleaning up your mess from getting all the stuff ready while you let them cook and get fully crispy. I'm going to call these done to start for our first round. And I have a platter with some paper towels, because even if olive oil is the best thing in the world and these aren't greasy, they're still greasy. So, and here, you make it look prettier by turning it over to the side where you know it got browner. Okay.